I'm a bad motherfucker.
Hey, guess what? You've been lied to about another war, it turns out. I know you've been lied to about every war, right? They lied about Vietnam through 4 different presidents. They lied about Iraq twice, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan for 20 years. If you read the Afghanistan papers, that's what that proved. They lied about Ukraine. There isn't a war they haven't lied about. It turns out now the Gaza war, it looks like we're being lied to about the Gaza war. Ben Swan has put together this video. I want to show you a little bit of it right now, and then we'll bring Ben in.
7 months ago, on October 7th, Hamas was able to carry out its shocking terror attack against Israel, despite Israel's intelligence, military, and security apparatus, commonly considered to be the best in the world. Bearing in mind Israel's incredibly sophisticated and capable defenses and brigades of trained IDF soldiers stationed near the Gaza border, the scale and the operational success of the Al-Aqsa flood attack surprised even Hamas. Hamas representative Ali Baraka explained to the Washington Post the ease with which Israel's entire security apparatus disintegrated, saying, quote, "We were expecting to get a smaller number of hostages and return to Gaza, but the Israeli army collapsed in front of us. What were we to do?" Well, in response to the Al-Aqsa flood attack, the Israeli military's retaliatory efforts, codenamed Operation Swords of Iron, has resulted in the deaths of over 100 journalists, 190 United Nations staff, 34,000 Palestinians, including 13,000 children, displaced nearly the entire Gaza population of 2 million people, and cost the United States almost $50 billion. So how did October 7th happen? Well, almost everyone in mainstream media was quick to call it an intelligence failure. The Guardian told its readers on the afternoon of October 7th that Hamas's murderous attack will be remembered as an Israeli intelligence failure for the ages. While the attack was still ongoing, on October 7th, Politico quoted Israel's former deputy national security advisor saying, quote, "It's a failure in terms of intelligence, operationally. It's clear that we were caught totally unprepared by this." And on October 8th, Jonathan Panikoff, former Deputy National Intelligence Officer on the Middle East, who's now at the Atlantic Council think tank, firmly educated the public that, quote, "This was an intelligence failure. It could not be otherwise."
Chagrin.
In fact, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu quickly tweeted, then deleted a statement saying that he had absolutely no prior knowledge of this coming attack, saying, quote, "Under no circumstances and at no stage was Prime Minister Netanyahu warned of war intentions on the part of Hamas." The tweet said that before it was promptly deleted. Why did Netanyahu's team delete that tweet? Did he, in fact, have intelligence that there would be an attack by Hamas? Well, the evidence seems to point to only one answer. Yes. Foreign security services, Israeli security services, and the Israeli public all knew that Hamas was planning a violent cross-border incursion where they would attempt to overrun and attack the kibbutz communities in southern Israel, and then take prisoners back to Gaza. And they also knew when. But it happened anyway. 10 days before the attack, and then again 3 days before the attack, Egypt's intelligence officials actually sent repeated warnings to the highest levels of the Israeli government. In one of those warnings, Egypt's premier intelligence minister, General Abbas Kamel, personally called Netanyahu and warned him that Hamas was about to do, quote, "something unusual, a terrible operation." Unnamed Egyptian officials told Ynet News that they were shocked by Netanyahu's indifference to the news. But Israel didn't have to trust or believe Egypt, because actually, most of the warnings of the October 7th attack came from Israeli civilians and the Israeli military itself. The civilians and soldiers who brought these emergency warnings to the military were ignored, and in some cases, strangely enough, threatened with legal action. So let's go all the way back to 2022 and then work our way forward to the days before the October 7th attacks.
So let me bring in Ben Swan. He's a 2-time Emmy-winning journalist who has worked for various TV stations, including KDBC El Paso, KFox in El Paso, KTSM in El Paso, WIX in Newport, Kentucky, Cincinnati, and RT America. He's also a political commentator and founder of the Truth in Media Project, a web series that focuses on investigative reporting and alternative news. Please welcome to the show, Ben Swan. Hey, Ben, how are you?
Jimmy, I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
So were you shocked as I was to learn that Wow, the Israeli army just kind of crumbled right in front of a bunch of guys in hang gliders and Adidas sweats. And
I think it was shocking, yeah.
And that also Benjamin Netanyahu, they did have advance warning of what was happening. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, it's not just weird, right? When you start to see the weird part, right, which you alluded to, when you hear about this story back in October and November, it's like, how did guys come across in paragliders? Like, is this real? This really happened? They flew across the border in these very like primitive makeshift setups. They were able to come across and yeah, exactly. It was like completely wild in the way they're coming in, and they overwhelmed Israeli defense forces. Again, as we pointed out, the best in the world. How do you manage to pull this off? And then when you start to look into the story, and what was surprising, it wasn't just, and you've played a lot of it so far, I hope you'll play more.
Yes.
It wasn't just what happened, right, leading up to October 7th, just before. Israel knew 2 years before. They had the blueprints because of spies in Gaza. They studied them. They knew exactly what was going to happen. They knew how it was going to happen. And Hamas followed those blueprints, by the way, to the letter. It was exactly what they had said they were going to do.
And so the thing that it's, I guess I should just expect it now that this has to be reported by people like you and places like this or the Gray Zone. It's never going to be reported on ABC or MSNBC or even Fox or CNN. They just go along with this was, again, what you just showed. Oh, no, it was an intelligence fail. We didn't know. Oh, we got caught with our pants down. Chagrin.
Well, not since the last BB's working both times. We had RC's working and then he's
That's right. Every time there's...
guy's always working his shift.
Every time there's a 9/11 type thing happen, BB seems to be in power. So let's go on. I'm going to show a little bit more of this, and we'll come back and get you to comment on it. Here we go.
Hamas followed its own blueprints that Israel already had in its possession with shocking precision. So Israel literally had the attack blueprints, but were they taken seriously by the IDF? Again, yes. The plans were diligently studied. In fact, a presentation on the planned attack was given to senior officers in the IDF's Gaza division. The presentation concluded with this sentence, quote, "This invasion constitutes the gravest threat that IDF forces are facing in the defense of Israel." So in response to all of this, did Israel's intelligence apparatus actually enhance or beef up their surveillance of the Hamas militants along the Gaza border? Well, actually, not only is the answer no, but stunningly, they did the exact opposite. They decided to entirely stop monitoring Hamas's handheld radio traffic because they saw it as a waste of effort. Even though during that same time, in 2022, Israelis living in the kibbutz communities near the Gaza border, most of whom have some type of military training because of Israel's mandatory IDF service laws, they were, according to Israeli media, picking up clear evidence that Hamas was practicing the breaching of the fence and conquering kibbutzim and seizing hostages and destroying everything in their path. Then in April of 2023, again, this is still 6 months before the attack, the IDF, according to Israeli media, actually did something even more surprising. They restricted the ability of Israeli citizens living along the border to monitor Hamas's wireless traffic. In September of 2023, that's less than a month before the attack, the head of the IDF's Devil's Advocate intelligence unit, which challenges prevailing narratives within Israel's military, twice alerted senior decision makers in both the army and the political spheres about Hamas's plans for a large-scale cross-border military operation. He reiterated those warnings in person at intelligence branch strategic assessment sessions on September 26th and September 27th. This is just days before the attack. During this period, again, just days before the Al-Aqsa flood attack, Israeli civilians residing in the kibbutzim near the Gaza border were witnessing with their own eyes and ears constant and enormous Hamas training exercises. The army reportedly turned a blind eye. One of these Israelis, Ben Shoshan, worked as a tour guide in the southeastern Israeli region surrounding Gaza. In a radio interview just days before October 7th, she remarked, quote, "Hamas has been training for weeks right up against the border, sometimes in massive numbers. I tried to warn the officers, but they told me I didn't know anything and that I was safe." On October 3rd, a journalist for Israeli Public Radio tweeted and made crystal clear that the bizarre and violent Hamas drills that were taking place on the Gaza side of the border were evident to everyone who was living alongside that border, including the Israeli military. The Islamic Jihad organization started noisy exercises very close to the border, with missile launches, simulating breaking into Israel and kidnapping soldiers. Didi Fold, a resident of Netiv Hatara, said, "It was significantly closer than previous times. The children wake up and they ask what's going on. There are explosions, booms. It is not similar to previous exercises." So it was clear to everyone that Hamas wasn't only planning to do something horrible, but it was also clear exactly what that horrible and evil thing was. According to a female IDF soldier who spoke to Israel's Channel 12 news program, she was constantly trying to warn her superiors about the gravity of the Hamas training exercises. And she was threatened with legal action, saying, quote, "We were told that if we continue to harass on this issue, you will stand trial." So, Egypt knew, the Israeli military knew, and the Israeli civilians knew. And yet 2 days before October 7th, the Israeli military took 2 entire commando brigades, that's around 100 soldiers, away from the soon-to-be breached locations of the Gaza border and sent them to the other side of the country, to the West Bank village of Huwara. Despite no Hamas presence being in Huwara, and despite there being giant Israeli dance parties taking place right along the same border fence where violent, escalating, and obvious Hamas drills of breaching and kidnapping were taking place. Does this make any sense? And have you heard about these dance parties? Because it turns out there's bizarre and inexplicable narratives surrounding the planning of these now infamous dance parties in Israel along the Gaza border.
So I thought it was weird that they had a rave next to a concentration camp and they were told, no, go have it.
Yes.
They checked. The people who organized that checked to see if, hey, is this safe to have it right by the, our big concentration camp? They said, yeah, go do it.
So, Ben, this reminds me a lot of what they said after 9/11. After 9/11, they said no one could have imagined that they would fly planes into these buildings, even though...
Except for Deutsche Bank, who short-sold those plane companies. They somehow guessed.
Even though then afterwards you find out that lots of people had imagined that. It was not only did the people inside the intelligence community imagine it, but it was on TV shows had imagined it.
They imagined trouble for you just stating obvious reality politically. That could lead to violence. They can game that out.
Yeah.
You can't game this one out though?
So what do you think this adds up to? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's a couple things. And by the way, 9/11 was always referred to as an intelligence failure also, right? Oh, it was an intelligence failure. Or agencies, we need more agencies to work together and have more power in order to not have intelligence failures, right? So that's the game they play. Look, when you really look at the evidence here, right? And by the way, but these dance parties, the one that happened on October 7th was only allowed, it came in late. It was proposed late. The head of the IDF in the area actually opposed it and said, nope, you can't have this dance party on the 7th because we need more time to be ready for it. It's Jewish holiday. We can't do it. We don't have soldiers in the area. And the reports are that when he made that protest, that the IDF authorities over his head said, nope, you're going to approve it. And they pushed it through. The bottom line is this, guys. If you look at the statements by Netanyahu and by his party after the fact, what have they said? Not even my words, not your words. What has he said? Netanyahu has said there was not political appetite in Israel to go into Gaza and to root out Hamas. And he says we did not have that until October 7th. It gave us the political will from the people, not only in Israel, but in the international community, from the U.S., others who would have said, no, you can't just go in there, right? Now, all of a sudden, you can, right? Because this horrible attack that no one could have ever predicted. And the fact is, not only could they have predicted it, they absolutely knew it was happening. They watched it happening, it looks like in real time, and they stepped away and said, let it happen. They allowed this to happen.
What, they use their own people as human shields? That's Hamas of them.
So what I have said on this show before is that it looked like exactly what this was that Israel stood down on purpose. They turned the other way. They let this happen. They did everything they could to make sure this happened so that they could use this attack on October 7th as the reason to go in and carpet bomb Gaza and slaughter these people and eventually take over Gaza.
Because that's keep Jews safe. Israel's the only reason Jews are safe, right?
Because that's the only right. So And that's the irony. So that's what it's looked like to us here. But your great reporting and the way you put this together spells it out perfectly. I mean, it just none of that makes sense whatsoever, unless what we surmise is happening, our theory, is true. Otherwise, that doesn't make any sense. That they could be that incompetent, that they would approve that party even after the local IDF person, even after their own citizens are telling them what's happening. So the only thing that makes sense is that Israel not only allowed this to happen, but did things that encouraged this to happen so they could use this as the reason to go in and do the slaughter that they're doing. And what do you do? You want to say something, Kurt?
You know why they probably didn't have an appetite to go in and get Hamas out of Gaza is because Bibi kept telling them we've got to support Hamas to prevent a two-state solution. So that probably dulled their appetite to go get rid of Hamas, paying Hamas the whole time.
So before October 7th, you talked about it, Ben, there wasn't a consensus inside Israel on to do this. So they couldn't have done this unless there was something like this, right?
Well, exactly right. And again, remember, almost 2 years before they got these plans, so they were studying, they were monitoring them. At some point, and this is where we don't know in the timeline, at some point the position changed, right? It appears, if you follow kind of the breadcrumbs here of the reporting, it appears it was sometime in 2023, sometime probably around April, that the highest levels of government, looks like Netanyahu's office and the highest levels, they come in and say, hey, you know, these plans we've had, the reports we've been doing, the monitoring we've been doing, we know exactly what these guys are going to do. You know what? Let's start to lean away from it. And I think this is where it becomes really problematic, right? Because we don't take this lightly at all in terms of the information that's here, right? It's pretty serious when a government allows something like this to happen. But even more than allowing it to happen, it appears that they did two other things. And one was that they prevented their own people who were living in these communities from knowing what was coming and lied to them repeatedly when it was questioned and people were saying, look, what's going on over here? Obviously, there's something different happening here. Can't you guys see what they're doing? No, you're safe. You're safe. You're safe. And then the fact that they would allow for this party on the 7th, which had not been previously scheduled, to allow that to happen also means that you're not just allowing it, you're creating the conditions for maximum carnage. You're creating the conditions that if you know Hamas is coming across, and that's why since we've done this report, some people have said, oh, so it was an inside job. No, it's not an inside job, right? When you use terminology like that, and that's intentional terminology that people start throwing out, right? It's a 9/11 conspiracy.
Yeah, that bullshit.
No. Yeah, they're trying to do that to you. And instead it's like, no, it's not an inside job. It was Hamas's plan. Hamas was going to do this. Israel could have knocked it down with no problem. They knew what was happening, when it was happening. They could have shot these guys out of the paragliders with no problem. But they chose to allow it to happen and created the conditions for maximum carnage.
And you're never gonna you'll never hear this. I'm telling you, you're never gonna hear. You won't even hear this on Piers Morgan. I bet you're not gonna hear it on MSNBC, CNN, Fox, New York Times, Washington Post. You'll never hear the truth about it. Just like you never hear the truth about Libya. You never hear the truth about Iraq. You never hear the truth about Afghanistan or Ukraine. They're lying to you about Ukraine. We've laid that out to you a million times. And so there's one more piece of this video I want to play, and here it is.
WeAreChange, which is also the location of the IDF's Gaza division, and it's only 3 miles from the Gaza border. The first party, planned months in advance, was a party called the Unity Festival. It took place on October 5th and 6th. Then the Nova Festival, the October 7th party, was actually added last minute, only a few days in advance of the event. So for obvious reasons, any significantly large gatherings on the Israeli side of the border with Gaza require Israeli military approval. Again, this is a part of the story that virtually no American media network will talk about. According to Israeli media reports, Lieutenant Colonel Sahir Fogel, an operations officer at the IDF's Gaza division, opposed the approval of the Nova Party based on a couple of things: the last-minute nature of its event application, the intensifying Hamas drills at the border, and because if something were to happen, more soldiers were on holiday. It was the Jewish holiday of Sukkot. The lieutenant colonel explained his opposition to the party's approval to his superiors, and he was instructed to allow the event to happen. Israeli newspaper Haaretz reported that other Gaza division officers privately told of irregular conduct and pressure surrounding the approval of that party. In February of 2024, Elkanah Fetterman, the head of security of the Nova Festival, gave an interview to Israel's Channel 14 where he made a statement that has not been reported on by any American media. He said this, quote, "I had a guard at the festival who had served in the Ream division near the Gaza border. And a week before the festival, he sent me a voice message, basically warning me, saying, quote, Elkanah, something is going to happen over Sukkot. I just wanted to let you know there were a lot of warnings. I passed the voice message on to the local IDF officials, and they told me everything was all right." After the attack, Fetterman called his friend in the IDF and asked him exactly what he knew, saying, quote, "You were speaking in codes. Tell me exactly what they showed you." He told me, "Elkanah, they told me there was going to be an invasion and that they were planning to take over settlements. I just wasn't allowed to tell you that." And that's what happened. If he knew what he knew, a driver on the Gaza border, what did those above him know? Because he is a small screw in the system, end quote. The Hamas attacks were violent and brutal, and they've been likened to tragic events such as the September 11th attacks or even the Holocaust, which makes it strange that Benjamin Netanyahu and members of his party have at times described these attacks as somewhat of a political gift. Nissim Vaturi, a member of Netanyahu's party in the Knesset, referred to the attack as sort of a gift from God because they are being used to justify the current ongoing war, stating, quote, "We were meant to fight this war against Hamas, as is happening now, and luckily for us, it came from the heavens." Well, back in January, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu explained that Israel did not have the domestic or international support to invade or destroy Gaza. He said the October 7th Hamas attack solved both of those problems for him.
Oh,
Listen
lucky.
to this.
We couldn't get the domestic consensus to make such a definitive solution to the problem of Hamas. That is, no one would agree across the Israeli public to go in and basically destroy Hamas, go throughout Gaza and destroy Hamas. We didn't have the international consensus either. Nobody would understand. Why are we doing it? Both conditions were created because of the Hamas savage attack on Israel on October 7th.
All of this information has been reported in isolation and without context. That is until now. But it in no way excuses the violent and brutal Hamas attacks of October 7th, in which so many lives were lost. But it does raise an important question. A question that brave people have to consider. Did the Israeli military, the Israeli intelligence community, and the political leadership of Israel allow this ghastly attack to happen to justify wiping out the population of Gaza? It also raises big questions for us. What type of war is the Biden administration and U.S. taxpayers supporting? Is this a war of self-defense, or is it genocide, justified by an attack that Israel likely could have stopped had it wanted to? These are heavy questions.
Yeah.
Just like all the wars.
Just like all the wars. And I just want to...
What's real?
I just want to remind people that, or inform them that Annie McCann is her name, a former MI5 intelligence officer. She explained how Israel bombed their own embassy in London in 1994 to frame Palestinian activists and terrorists for it. And if Israel was capable of such barbaric false flags then, what are they capable of now? Well, obviously, they're capable of allowing this to happen so they could go in and commit a genocide, which is exactly what's happening. Some people call it ethnic cleansing because that sounds nice, like they're cleaning them.
I call it what you want. The numbers don't speak for themselves.
Right. Yes.
You know, the Holocaust, it means burnt sacrifice.
Uh-huh. Is that what it means?
It's a sacrifice. So that's really what the word means. So we haven't had a war on the books since World War II, or official legal war in America.
Right.
All of our wars have been Holocaust, if you count the number of people we killed. Vietnam, by the time everything was said and done, the real numbers are like almost 6 million. They tell you it's about 500,000. Nah, it's a lot more. So they've been doing these the whole time, and they're sacrifices to get what you want. Oh, we couldn't do this until this happened.
Yeah.
What's valuable to us? Our own people will sacrifice. You see how mundane and secular it is? It's not like spooky. It's just what powerful people do.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
So,
if I can just say too,
yeah, come on in.
This is a 7-part series. I know it feels like we covered a lot in that one. We did. It's actually a 7-part series, and so we're covering a lot. There's a lot more to this, including something that I think a lot of people in the United States do not know about. It's something called the Hannibal Directive, which goes into real detail about this is part of Israel's official policy.
Yeah.
Part of their official policy is you allow people within your communities to die if it justifies a greater cause. And it's so interesting to me as an American, right? In the US, our foreign policy, I don't think it's that Israel is mimicking our foreign policy. I think that we're mimicking theirs. I think we've been copying what Israel's done for a long time.
They said it in 9/11. We got to be more like Israel. They would say it out loud. I remember this vividly. Like, yeah, Israel's got it figured out. We all thought that.
So you know what's interesting is that it seems, what is that policy called?
Hannibal Directive.
The Hannibal Directive.
So we had Scott Ritter on the show, and he was saying how the Hamas actually has their own version of that. He didn't call it that, but he said they knew when they did that attack on October 7th, that Israel would overreact and slaughter all these people. And I'm like, well, why would Hamas do that? And they said, well, that to them, it's just like they're worth sacrificing them if they can get a victory. And it looks like now they've turned the entire world against Israel over this. And so Hamas sees that as a victory. And Hamas was willing to sacrifice the 30,000 or however many people have been killed now.
They had no choice because of the Abraham Accord. So all of them were good as dead if those Abraham Accords passed.
So they were willing to do some. So it seems like both sides are willing to have their own people be massacred in order to get a political goal, right? That's what it looks like to me. What do you have any comment on that?
I totally agree with you. Absolutely, that's exactly what it is. And look, it's so one of the non-binary choices. It should not be a binary choice, right? Is either you're with Israel or you're with Hamas. No, that cannot be the only choices here. Hamas is not a kind or good leader to its people, right? They do sacrifice their people. They do use them as human shields. But let's also be honest that Hamas came to power in a secular Palestine. Right? They were not invited by the people to take over. They essentially destroyed the lives of a lot of people, murdered a lot of secular Palestinians in their seizing of power, but they did it with Israeli funding. They did it with Israel's funding, and Israel made sure they had that power. They wanted this, right? The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah. So Israel did this. So we've explained it. They, instead of working with the secular PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, that was less militant, they decided to prop up a terrorist organization so that they could again say, we don't have anybody to negotiate with. These people are savages. These people are terrorists, and we have to wipe them out.
You know, like America.
But how often does that? Yeah. How often does that happen in the U.S., right? We do that all the time. That's exactly that's what we did in Syria. It's what we do in Iraq. We do it to us. Put in ISIS. We fund them, and then we say, oh, look how terrible these people are. We've got to overthrow Syria now. We've got to overthrow Libya because look how terrible their leader is.
Yeah,
the American gangs, the MS-13, recall that's somebody from the military from one of our many conflicts helping people who was trained by us. That's the official lore of who started it.
Yeah.
We all do the same thing in this amazing rules-based order of the Western world.
Yeah, rules-based order. I love that. Well, where can people find more of this, the rest of your series, Ben?
Absolutely. So the website is truthinmedia.com, truthinmedia.com. On X, you can follow us at truth_in_media. We'll have a special episode that will drop tomorrow about these hostages and the hostages being freed. There's a lot to that story. And then we'll be picking up from there again with a whole bunch of episodes explaining to people the bigger picture around this, guys. So I really appreciate you covering it.
Let me just say, I first became aware of you when you did some work on the Seth Rich story. And guess what? Everybody said there was a crazy conspiracy. You know, whenever you're not allowed, I knew this when I was at the Young Turks, which was billed itself as the #1 online news show in the world with over 5 million subscribers. I would be on panels with Cenk Uygur and Ben Mankiewicz, and I remember I was asking them, can anybody remember the last time reporters, people on news shows weren't allowed to ask obvious questions about an unsolved murder investigation? And they couldn't. Of course they couldn't, because the only time you weren't allowed to ask questions about an unsolved murder investigation was Seth Rich. That was the only time you weren't allowed to ask that question. And so now here we are 7 years later, 8 years later, and the FBI will not release Seth Rich's laptop. Not only that, they've been ordered now twice by a judge to release it under FOIA, and they still won't release it. They say we're going to release Seth Rich's contents of his laptop in 65 years. So I certainly feel vindicated for asking those questions. I was wondering how you felt about it.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a kind of a long history for me in this. I know for you as well, for a lot of us, right, who have been asking the questions for a long time. And for so long, we were demonized for questioning anything. Now I think we're living in a moment where a lot of folks are able to say, okay, well, it makes sense. But also, the more that comes out, the more it all ties together. And it's not because, again, it's one cabal that does everything. It's that they're very unoriginal. People in power are incredibly unoriginal.
They're hacks.
As soon as they do one thing that works, they all just imitate it. So they just run a playbook at that point. And so I think we're seeing that happen, but I think vindication is probably the right word on a lot of stories that continually kind of rise to the surface.
Yeah. Wait, the other thing is, you're saying they make you pick Israel or Hamas. That's ridiculous. You pick Likud party of Bibi Netanyahu and messianic psychopaths that are in that party. They make you pick them. You don't even get to pick what party in Israeli politics you're with.
Right.
You have to be with Bibi, because all this reporting you're doing, you're showing Israeli sources. I haven't been able to get over this the whole time. If you want to know what's happening, you can read Israeli shit, and it's more honest than the obviously captured by Mossad media we have here.
Well, and then to that point, I mean, that was something that we were very intentional about. I have an amazing producer working with me on this. His name is Jeremy Lafredo. Did an incredible job. But one of the things that we were really intentional about is going after Israeli media sources, because we know that they're going to say, oh, yeah, you guys are making stuff up. This is all conjecture. I mean, at the end of that piece, and I'll do it with everyone that we do, I would challenge any journalist anywhere to come back and fact check us and show us where we're lying, show us where we're wrong, because this is all sourced. They won't even bother to do it because they don't want to have the conversation in the first place.
Yep.
And so my final question, do you ever bump into Jackson Hinkle at the hair salon?
I was going to say you have great hair, too. I was also thinking your hair was great.
Appreciate it, guys.
Okay. All right. Ben Swan, Truth in Media. Check out, he's dropping a new episode tomorrow on the hostages and the hostage situation in Gaza. Great job.
Yes,
thanks for coming on.
It's great, because it's not bogged down if Israel should exist. It's just the facts of the thing.
It's just the facts of the
that
case.
You could show to somebody who's like emotional about it.
Yeah. All right, Ben, thank you very much, buddy.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, let's go over to Steph.
Okay, Jimmy D. That was a great interview. You know, it's so interesting hearing about, like, oh, they knew about it. They knew about it. They knew about it. And
we all knew that.
Well, it's like they didn't know about January 6th. They don't know it. Like in our country, they don't know about January 6th, or they did know it.
Shit.
They got one trick.
The whole plan
Same
is like,
shit.
we know about it, but if we don't prepare for it, then we'll have to come back with, you know, both barrels and attack and, you know, take away our civil liberties. All right, here we go.
Infuriating.
Oh, fuck.
Jimmy Chazier, Jimmy Barbecue, should contact Ibrahim Traore and start a revolution. Thank you, E. SS, every perpetrator began as a victim. There's no such thing as good people / bad people. There are well-treated or healed people versus traumatized and unhealed people. SS, thank you for that. Basil, or is it Basil? The cloves have no emperor. Thank you. Christine, big heart, right back at you. Marty, Biden is letting his son be a fall guy. Shame on Joe Biden. He will pardon Hunter on 11/6/24. This is all fake. Marty, he's not the fall guy at all. At all. Hi, Betsy. Steve Forbes reported Biden will step down and the DNC will replace him before September 2024 with Gavin Newsom. Is currently running a shadow campaign, but Forbes doesn't think DNC will anoint Newsom. I don't think so, Greg. I don't see it. I don't see it happening, but you know, anything certainly can happen. They can change the rules anytime they want to change the rules. Hunter wasn't dealing with the CPC. He was dealing with a private company. The chairman of the company is being detained by the Chinese government. Terry. Don't forget about it. The cocaine found in the White House, that's just short of what? went out of the news cycle. Drifter, yeah, they couldn't figure that out. Joe Rogan's latest quest was Freeway Rick Ross, who was the largest distributor of the CIA's Iran-Contra cocaine. Give it a listen. Hey, thank you for that, Max. If BlackRock signed a deal with Ukraine, what happens when the government doesn't exist? Does this mean the U.S. will never stop this war? We've had endless wars. Hunter wasn't... Oh, I read that one from Terry. Thank you, Terry. Hey, Jimmy and gang, did you guys catch my last message about Nate from Canadian Prepper? I may have missed the read. If you did, what did I miss? Stand by, Noah. I know I see that read coming up. A comprehensive breakdown of the entire Biden laptop was compiled by the investigative group Marco Polo. BidenReport.com. 459 crimes documented in a fully cited, searchable format. From Twitter... Okay.
Now that that laptop's verified real?
Yeah.
See that at the time, and I remember, who was I working with? They're like, do you think that laptop... I couldn't believe they were saying, do you think the laptop's real?
Yes, of course. Why
and I'm
would
like, did you not look at... I go, didn't you look at the pictures? Or no, of course not. I wouldn't read Hillary's emails, and I wouldn't look at Hunter's dick. He does have a sweet pee. I'll tell you one thing. Of all his shame, his limp dick selfie ain't one of them.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that insight. Hey, camera 4 beside me, your doggy is all over you. Oh, that's why. I gave her one too, by the way. I may have missed this, but I do believe that private flights are chartered through a third party, so there's no, this is so-and-so's plane, Vienta Kiss. Thank you, Vienta Kiss. Okay, back to Jimmy.
Hey, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there for more AM Joy and the rest of MSNBC. And click on any of the videos right here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. And you can get more videos from MSNBC for free every day with our newsletter. Just visit
Isn't it swell? The memes make themselves. They found a rabbi hole, tunnels and all. There's Jews in the walls. Isn't it bliss? The rabbinical grace soiling the mattresses. Well, let me tell you. If I were Rabbi Shmuley and diddle 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 digga digga diddle diddle dum, all All day long I diddle little bums. If I were a schmooly man, I'd peddle all my dildos, dreidel dildos, selling dildos with my daughter and her mum. If I were a Jewish schmooly man, I'd be digging with a dildo in my bum. I'd wear a grotesque nose and go grab some goyim right on the nipple with a pinch. A Shabbos lap dance brace for the youngest mensch.
At this time, more than any other time, you know, revolution is necessary. It is necessary. Not only based on what has happened with the MOVE organization, you know, the babies that have been murdered, you know, MOVE adults that have been murdered, bombs being dropped on us, but past that to what is happening with all black people, so-called minority people, you know, money poor people. You know, this government, as has been said earlier, has waged war on us. But you know, something about us, particularly here in America, we don't really understand that. You know, we don't really know what war is. You know, for black people, for poor people, that people see as good, that they wasn't forced to do, that they didn't do to try to keep black people appeased, you know, and calm down so that black people wouldn't riot. A prison situation is a crystallized example of that. You can make phone calls in prison. They have movies in prison. But they don't have those things because they just want to be nice to prisoners. They have those things because they know damn well if they don't have, you know, people being able to contact their family, if they don't have, you know, facilities for people to sit there and watch movies, people are going to be frustrated, upset, and they're going to direct that frustration at them prison administrators. And they're going to have riots on their hands. You know, they're going to have people in them prisons turning them prisons out. That's why they have movies. That's why they have access to phones the way they do. And a stop to it when we don't like it, or encouraging it when it's something that's in our interest. You know, we have to call the shots. The people have to take the reins of this system and start dictating, you know, what we need, what needs to be done. And, you know, taking the initiative to do it ourselves. We can't rely on this system. I mean, you know, don't people see what's happening? Every single confrontation that MOVE people have been involved in, every single issue, you know, oppression, economic issues, every single issue facing our people, you know, is something that can be dealt with very, very simply. All people got to do is make their wishes known. All people have to do is stand up and say, listen, we're not accepting that. Unity is the key. Unity is the key to revolution. Revolution ain't nothing to be afraid of. It ain't nothing to shy away from. Revolution, contrary to what officials, you know, this system and those backing the officials running the system, you know, want people to believe that revolution means violence, you know, means blood in the street. I'm saying it can get to that point, but it don't have to be violent. You know, when people come together and take a strong stand on an issue, this government don't have no choice but to listen. Where you think they get their authority from? They don't have no power, but they do have authority to do certain things. Where you think they get it from? They get it from us, from the people. You know, they get it from us accepting the things that they do to be done to stop it. Then you have some people who want to then turn around and say, yeah, well, you know, it's the best we have, and want to make excuses. The time for excuses is over. It's over. You know, every man, woman, and child has to be involved in this revolution. Not only has to be, but is, whether you want to be or not. I mean, our babies gave their lives for this revolution on May 13th. You know, men, women, and children were murdered. And not just MOVE babies, you know. What about all of the young men, women, children 8, 9 years old shot down on the street by cops, by drug pushers. I mean, where do you think that mentality comes from? It comes from this system, from the mentality of this system of getting over, making a quick buck, I'm saying that's where that needs to be done to stop it. Then, what I want people to really, really understand is that it's past time. It is past time for poor people, black people, to realize that this system has failed you. It has failed you. You can't get nothing from it. And what people got to do is withdraw our support from it and start doing for ourselves. That's what we got to do. How long are people going to sit back and beg, this government to do what's right when for hundreds of years, all you've gotten is a slap in the face. All you've gotten is this government kicking your ass. That's all. That's all black people have ever gotten from this government.